Another first half of drama on Sports Sound.
A season of action and reaction.
It is a stonewall penalty kick. I was astonished at it.
Astonished that people disagree with you.
The new league season kicks off this weekend.
Scottish football lives here. BBC Radio Scotland.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast and the latest edition of our Premiership previews with me, David Currie, and BBC commentator Liam McLeod. It is all about Hearts today, and with that in mind, our special guest is Hearts fan and View from the Terrace star. Can I say that, Joel Sked? Can I call you a View from the Terrace star?
Contributor. I wouldn't go as far as star, so right, just go contributor.
Good to have you on board. And Liam, I just thought just before we start, since it's Hearts we're talking about, I think we better define our roles at the outset. Who's picking the questions? Who's the technical director in this operation, shall we say?
Well, it's obviously you, but, you know, I don't mind taking it in a different direction every now and again if you fancy that. It's up to yourself.
Well, see, that was my ham-fisted way of trying to kind of open the discussion, Joel, by saying, are you clear about who's doing what in the Jambos management team? Stephen Naismith, Frankie McAvoy, and does it really matter?
Yeah, it's a strange one, and I think the big issue around it with the general feeling amongst Hearts fans is just probably the optics around it. I think for me, I think it's pretty clear that Stephen Naismith's obviously seen as the head kind of honcho, and I think Frankie McAvoy's admitted that he will be the manager in time. Stephen Naismith spoke recently and says that everything's the same as it was last season, just the kind of change in roles, how they operate. McAvoy's obviously said that he's going to take the final decision if they have any disagreement. Obviously, this is around the fact that Naismith's not got a pro licence and we're going into Europe, and the first team coach, the head coach, has to have that pro licence. So yeah, it's a wee bit convoluted from the outside, but I think the main thing is as long as the players are clear, as long as there's a clear message getting put across to the players, I think everything's fine. But I wouldn't be surprised if within the next couple of months that Stephen Naismith moves as to the head coach and McAvoy part of the coaching team. But it seems like Gordon Forrest, McAvoy and Naismith work really well together as a management team. So I don't think there's too much of a change from last season. It's just a wee bit unusual. But Hearts fans are used to seeing unusual management teams from the past, so it's not as bad as what has been maybe going back to some of the Romanoff era appointments.
I've just got this image in my head, Liam, of the manager's office at Tynecastle, and it says on the wee sign, head honcho.
Yeah, is that on the office door? Yeah, look, I don't personally see a massive issue with it. I can see why there would be critics who might look at it and, you know, raise their eyebrows. But, you know, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, Hearts and Aberdeen both had co-managers, and up at Pittodrie it was Jockey Scott with Alex Smith, and obviously Hearts had Sandy Jardine and Alec MacDonald, and, you know, it worked. It worked at both clubs to different levels. I think Hearts wish it had worked a bit more than it ultimately did. The Hearts supporters, as Joel mentioned there, have been through the mill when it comes to managerial appointments over the last 15, 20 years. So, you know, this is nothing compared to the Romanov years that Joel was mentioning there. So I don't think it's a huge issue. Stephen Naismith's an ambitious guy. I think he's got some really good ideas. And actually, when you look at the way Hearts were playing in the closing weeks of the season last term, it wasn't enough to usurp Aberdeen in third. But the style of football was really good. I mean, they were playing practically a 4-2-4. I think he found a role for Yutaro Oda on the right-hand side. Ginnelli's a loss for them, but they'll hope that they can cover that. I think they've got another Japanese forward coming in Kusuke Tagawa, who looks as though he's got a decent pedigree, so perhaps he'll hit the ground running. We'll wait and see. But obviously Shanklin's the main man for them. He was last term. His 28 goals was the best return by a Hearts striker since John Robertson's 31, I think it was, in 87, 88, as Robbo was very keen to tell me when I was talking to him about that. he left Hearts for Newcastle with 7 games of that season still to play. So he could well have added to that. But look, the recruitment has to be right. And I think so far, when you see what they've done, I know the Hearts fans are a bit frustrated they haven't done more. But there's a couple of new guys that have come in. Frankie Kent's come in. Callum Nieuwenhof is another one with real potential. So they've had to be patient, have the Hearts supporters, but as long as they've got the squad in place by the end of August.
That seems to be the pattern, Joel, that with Premiership signings, because they're coming from all airts and parts now, let's be honest, none of us really know the quality of the people that are coming in.
No, I think it's a big thing for, I know Hearts and Aberdeen as well, they've gone to different markets, and I think the clubs are having to do that now, because if you look at in the past, there was a lot of interest in just going down south and trying to get players from England, but the money in England is absolutely bonkers. I mean, Frankie Kent came in from a League One side and he was on very, very good money down there, whereas you could probably get a bit more bang for your buck by searching into these unknown markets. Aberdeen have done it really well with the Balkan market. Hearts have gone into Japan, they've gone into Australia, and I know the club are quite keen on the South American market. It's a very difficult market to operate in, and now you've seen Kenneth Vargas from Costa Rica. So I think it's a testament to the creativity, the ambition to go to these different places and get players in. With Hearts, I think they want to get players who are young, who have basically sell-on value, who have the potential or have the potential to get into their international teams. So I think it's encouraging, and for fans, it's exciting. Bringing players in who you don't know too much about, and you can get really excited about. A guy from the Japanese top flight, a guy from the Costa Rican top flight. Those are the signings you want to stir the feeling ahead of the new season.
Well, ahead of the new season, you both mentioned Hearts and Aberdeen there. We are primarily discussing Hearts in this podcast. Do you both foresee a kind of Barbie Oppenheimer type of contest between Hearts and Aberdeen for third? None of you are laughing at that.
Yes, I think Hearts and Aberdeen are best placed to battle it for third. It'll be interesting to see how Aberdeen handle the European and domestic schedule. I think it's a wee bit nicer this season than it was for Hearts last season, just because of the World Cup break. So the European games are spread out a bit more. At the moment, Aberdeen's squad's quite light, so they're having to do more. Whereas Hearts, since we've got Craig Halkett coming back, Benny Beningame, Liam Boyce, Craig Gordon, Barry Mackay still to come back, that there's already a good squad there, that it didn't need a lot of work. It just needed quality in certain places to really add to it. And yeah, I'm confident that it'll be a battle between Aberdeen and Hearts for third.
You're talking about Oppenheimer and Barbie, but at one point it was mission impossible for Aberdeen last season, trying to get back into the battle for third spot. The fact that Hearts surrendered such a huge points differential between the two is massively frustrating for everyone at the club. I mean, it ultimately cost Robbie Nielsen his job. I think Hibs will be in amongst it as well. And, I know the Hearts fans are more than happy in getting stuck in the Hibs when things aren't going quite so well at Easter Road. But I think everyone wants to see really good competitive Edinburgh derbies with something riding on it. We saw that in the last day of last season, when it might have been that fifth place wasn't enough for Europe. It ultimately was, but it was a fair old battle at Tynecastle on the last day, and everyone wants to see these Edinburgh derbies, meaning with those kind of stakes riding on it, and Aberdeen in the mix as well. I think that those 5 teams, the top 2, and then Aberdeen, Hearts and Hibs, look nailed on for top 6 this season. Hearts were down in what they were the previous campaign. I think a lot of that comes down to the European schedule, which Aberdeen are going to have to try and cope with this term. They also had so many injuries to key men. Yeah,
I think just jumping on that, I think the frustrating aspect of, you touched on it, the blow in the lead with Aberdeen, the frustrating aspect was that we had actually handled the European and domestic schedule pretty well, because we got into I think it was when we got to the World Cup break, we were 4 points, I think maybe 4 points behind Aberdeen. And then after coming back, went on a great run and opened up this great lead. I think it was maybe 9 points, 10 points ahead of Aberdeen.
It was 11 at one point. Yeah.
11 at one point. And then it was the fact that we didn't have this schedule, and it just the lead got frittered away. I think that was one of the most frustrating aspects, and injury certainly played a part. We've had I got to the stage where our style of play, it was a wee bit too passive, especially when we had the ball.
They'd only lost 1 in 13 before the game at Motherwell, and for some reason they fell off a cliff after that. They won just 3 of their last 13, which included a run of 6 successive losses. And I mean, it was relatively inexplicable, actually, because they did have a big squad, still do have a big squad, but for some reason things just fell apart spectacularly for them.
Well, I was going to say, Joel, I used the clumsy and ultimately unfunny analogy of Barbie versus Oppenheimer there, but see if
I liked it, David. I was laughing. I must have just muted my mic. You didn't hear me.
But see if we look at the big picture in terms of Hearts over the past decade. You know, you had administration, relegation, promotion, controversial lockdown relegation, the transition to fan ownership. Given all of that, finishing 4th 10 years after what's happened to Hearts, to fans of other clubs, that looks pretty decent.
Yeah, it's a very, very good story, and it's. If you don't finish third, the least you can do for Hearts is finish 4th. The last time we finished third in the top 3 back-to-back seasons was under Levine. So it does show you how kind of difficult it is. But I think what that shows is how much Hearts have underperformed for a very long time, and that we should be doing a lot better. And third should be the aim. Certainly the top 4, the team should not be dropping out the top 4, top 5.
Now, Stephen Naismith, I know, Liam, an advocate of giving youth its fling. So are we about to see, maybe actually Joel's better placed to answer this one, are we about to see a heap of academy graduates making the switch to the big team?
I think slowly but surely this season, I think you actually might find, hopefully if Naismith's still in charge in 12 months' time, I think that you might see a transition, a stronger transition then. There's a couple of guys have been involved in pre-season. There've been a few guys involved in pre-season, but Aidan Denham, centre midfielder, he was heavily involved. James Wilson, 16-year-old, who was wanted by a number of Premier League clubs. He signed a new deal. He's been involved, and I've watched a few of the B team this season, and there's 2 or 3 players in there who I think have got a good chance. And Naismith, of course, having been the B team manager last season, knows a lot of these guys. Hearts fans there's been a real desire to see signings being made, but we've got a decent sized squad, and I think it's still important is to have this pathway to allow these players to come through. And I do think that this crop, there's a couple, but
what about Finlay Pollock, Joel?
Yeah, he's well liked. I like him. I think he's struggled with injuries, so he's not been able to get a good run of games. He's not been involved in the B games I've seen, and he's not been heavily involved in any of the pre-season games. But I know he is very highly thought of. He'd obviously broke into the team previously and showed a lot of promise. So yeah, I think he's an interesting one to look out for potentially. But I think we might see a lot more in the next 18 months rather than so kind of 12 to 18 months rather than the 6 to 12 months.
Can I just pick up on something Joel said there, Liam, when he said if Stephen Naismith's still in charge at the end of the season? Hopefully. Aye. But I mean, it just shows the precarious nature. We had the podcast the other day talking about Livingston and David Martindale, now the longest serving manager in the Premiership with, what is it, about 2.5 years?
Yeah, look, this is a big season for Stephen Naismith personally, not just because he's getting his badges all sorted out and that sort of stuff. And to be fair, Frankie McAvoy's a very experienced campaigner. So, you know, the two of them working in tandem might actually end up being a masterstroke by Hearts, an unintentional masterstroke, really. But I think if he can start the season well, if they can get through the 2 rounds that they've got to come through, and they've got, I think it's Rosenborg or Crusaders, isn't it? They were 2-2 after the first leg. The second leg's in Norway. You would expect Rosenborg to come through that one, and they were a distant third in the Norwegian top flight last season, miles behind Molde. So, you know, whoever comes through that, it's a winnable tie then, potentially into the playoffs. It's going to be very difficult. And then they obviously want to do well in the cups. They've got Partick Thistle at home in the League Cup in the last 16, so it's a decent draw for them. It's a home tie. It's what they would have wanted. and against lower league opposition. So he's got an opportunity, Joel, doesn't he, to have a right good start to the campaign. And I mean, Europe would just be a massive bonus for him, and that would get him a heck of a lot of credit in the bank, I would have thought, if you can take them into the groups.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. It's I wouldn't go as far as saying it's as big as winning the cup, but in terms of like the finance it brings,
it's not far off it. Yeah,
it brings the club, and the fact that I would imagine you'd have to beat Rosenborg, which it would still be a scout, but they're struggling in the Norwegian league this season. It's a type of game now where you think it's the type of tie where you kind of hope Hearts can actually win through. Do that, then it's there'll be big teams waiting in the playoff round. Win that, and that's it would take a shock to get into the group stages, which would be absolutely huge. The finances that come with that, and then you mentioned the League Cup. We've not won the League Cup since the 60s, and it's we've got an embarrassing record in the League Cup, and I think a lot of Hearts fans are really, really keen to see that put right. And what a great opportunity with Thistle coming to Tynecastle, and then you're only 2 games away from Hampden final, which takes place before the end of the year.
What do you think the squad still needs to compete on all these fronts, Joe?
Providing we get Tagawa and Vargas in the door, I think we need certainly probably need more cover at right back. Nathaniel Atkinson is the only kind of out and out right back in the team. Sibic came on against Leeds on Sunday and played there. I think he's capable of doing that. And then you've got Rocco Friel in the B team, who's got a lot of promise. But I think Hearts fans would like another right back in. A big one is how far Halkett is away from returning to the starting or the return to the squad, because he was a huge miss last season. The goals we conceded from set pieces and open play crosses was really, really poor, both domestically and in Europe, and it proved really, really costly. There's no one in the squad who can replicate what Halkett does and sticking his head on everything and anything. Kent's been brought in. He is probably more of an aggressive defender, so hopefully he can fill that role. But if Halkett's going to still be a wee bit away, then probably another centre back. But looking at the squad as a whole, I think it's in pretty good position once these 2 forwards come in. Giannelli, like Liam said, was an absolute massive miss, just because the pace he provided in the final third allowed Hearts to stretch teams and give Shankland a lot more space. So hopefully Vargas and Tagawa can provide that. And you've got Oda, who came on to a game towards the end of last season, and Banny Mackay still to come back. So there's looking like there's going to be plenty of options. And like I said, you do want to provide a pathway should a youngster like Pollock, like James Wilson or others to maybe step in. Connor Smith as well.
That was a comprehensive answer, Joel. Thanks, Liam. Have you got anything to add to Joel's analysis?
No, I think the Hearts squad's in fine nick just now. As I said earlier on, I think some of the fans are a bit frustrated that they've made so few signings so far. But a lot of that comes down to the fact that when it's the summer, you're always excited about new signings coming to your club. I actually said earlier that as long as they've got the squad in place by the end of August, then fine. But of course, these European qualifiers come during August, so you're straight into these massive matches, which are potentially extremely lucrative for the club on all kinds of levels, as Hearts know from last season. And the fans will want those European trips. I gather Joel and the rest of them had a good old kick at it when they went away onto the continent last season. And they had some really good trips there, didn't you? Florence and Istanbul and out in Riga. I mean, that's 3 magnificent cities to go to. And they want a taste of that again. I know they'll get a small taste of it with the qualifying ties, they will hope, plural. That's just massive for them, as we've just been saying. But yeah, look, I think the Hearts squad's fine. What you want when you're battling on all fronts is you want to have at least 2 players for each position in the first team, and they're not far off that.
Right, I tell you what, Liam, you know what's coming next.
Predictions.
No one gets out of these podcasts without giving their predictions, so I'll come to Joel first. Joel, you can be as precise or as woolly as you like.
What, are you just looking for a league position?
Aye.
Or third?
Oh, nailed on, Liam.
Well, they'll be challenging for that, certainly. I mean, look, if they can tighten things up at the back, then they will be there or thereabouts in third. come the end of the campaign. But they're going to be up against it. Aberdeen and Hibs will be pushing them for sure.
OK, thank you very much to Liam McLeod, BBC commentator, and to Joel Sked, Hearts supporter of note. You have been listening to the Scottish Football Podcast, a Premiership preview edition. We'll have another preview podcast tomorrow.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.